Good afternoon, everyone, from Dunrovin Ranch in Lolo, Montana. And with me, of course, is our very own awesome Osprey curator, head scientist, Michael Academia. And
Hello,
today
everyone.
you come to us from LA, do you not?
Yes, I am staying with family right now, and in mid-August, I'll be moving to Virginia for the College of William and Mary.
Well, what a great summer it's been for us to have you with us, Michael. This
It's
is,
mutual. I've been learning so much. This has been a learning experience.
yeah. Well, for all of us. And that was one of the things that we would like to kind of touch on today is what others have to offer us in the way of learning about the project itself. So if you are hearing me, I hope that you will go to the Awesome Osprey page and you will participate on the Awesome Osprey chat because Michael and I are going to be discussing some aspects of the project that we would love some feedback. And so we're going to keep our eye right here on the chat and hope that you chime in because this is so much more meaningful to us if we can get those of you who have been participating to give us some feedback. So I thought I would kind of start off here, Michael, by first of all saying that this was the first year that we had expanded the project to include multiple nests over a multiple time frame. And in the past, I know that people focused just on a 3-week time period, and now we're asking people for really a 3 to 4 month time period. It's a little bit a longer time period. And the fact that we've added a number of nests makes this a very different situation this year. So how has that played out for our participation? And I'm just going to I'm going to come out with my observations, and then let's just see if you concur, and then let's see if people want to chime in on that. And I would have to say that most of the conversations that I have seen taking place, and I haven't been on nearly as much as you have, but are with people who are already connected to these nests in one form or another, that they were not people who just joined the Awesome Osprey project. Has that been your experience, Michael?
I agree, Suzanne. I concur. The scope of this project, I think, breaks some ground. There's never been a project where there's been multiple nests being
Yeah,
observed and for being this long as well.
right.
And yeah, a lot of nests do have their own independent groups that are loyal, that are specific to the nest. So I think that is definitely a factor on the participation of this project.
Yeah, I think that people just sort of migrate to the birds that they know. There seems to be a bonding going on. People really love watching a known animal, like your own dog or your own horse or whatever, that you become bonded, and that really ups your commitment to watching it. So, what does that mean in the future for us? I've been kind of thinking about that, and I'm thinking that perhaps next year we could try by asking number one if people had a nest preference, and if they did, to allow them to stick with that nest, and instead of having to go from nest to nest, and then if people didn't, perhaps we would assign them a nest and try to break people up into those specific nests.
I like
Uh,
that approach. I really do because some of the nests right now they do have a loyal following, and the scope of the project is okay. There's some. It's not a massive amount of people, but there's a few of them that have been really committed to taking data from day one all the way to pre-incubation, incubation, brooding to post-fledging. So if they are assigned their nest, I think that would encourage them to stay committed to observe those nests. And also to, I think, as more people get turned on to Osprey web cameras, new people can be assigned to nests that they've never seen before. And that way they can have their loyalty to that new nest.
yeah, and I also wonder if we if you know took if you had a nest preference, if we designed the project so that we asked you to ask um, one nest plus one more, and asked our participants to note differences, because I think one of the big advantages of multiple nests is you do start to see that there are differences. And this might give us I mean, it might be a little more complicated in terms of our gathering data, but you know, I think people are, those who are watching all this are learning that to see that there are real differences. And the other thing I would say, Michael, is that your updates have been most useful in that regard. You know, when
Oh,
you walk us through nest by nest, I think that that really depthens our appreciation of it. And for those of you watching, I'd really appreciate your commenting on that. You know, specifically, would you answer the question, did you like the updates? And is that something that we should have on a weekly basis? Start each one of our broadcasts with an update, because that excited me about some of the otherness, the things that you were pointing out and getting me interested in. So those of you who are watching and have access to the chat, please chime in about that. Um, and also, I do think that there is a certain amount of fatigue of committing to such a long time period. And I'm not quite sure how to address that in the context of an overall project, but I was wondering if we might consider in future years breaking it into 2 or 3 week chunks where people would commit to watching a specific nest or a pair of nests for a smaller period of time. How would that work for you, Michael?
I agree with the fatigue. I think in some studies that have determined that long, arduous citizen science projects that are tedious, and also too with having to identify difficult taxonomical species can be very
Mm-hmm.
difficult. It's like even with Osprey nest video cameras, sometimes fish identification is not possible. There's a lot of bias and there could be a lot of error too. So
Right.
if this continues day by day, you know, hours upon hours, this can be very difficult. So again, it's just finding that balance is really important with the rigors that can withstand the academic scientific community, and also, you know, the participation and the love of the citizen scientists, and blending that together to produce something that can be substantial is the number one challenge. And it's difficult. You know, you even have scientists at Cornell that are trying to figure this out. But
Right.
you know, this again, we're breaking ground. There hasn't been a project viewing multiple cameras like
Right.
this, Osprey cameras, and the scope. You know, the scope to get really citizen science recognized like this project is hard to pull off.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I also wonder if we, you know, again, there's a lot of options about how we might organize this, you know, and I'll go back to your updates, because it might be that each week the whole group goes to a different nest. I mean, we all watch a particular nest for a week, you know, and really start to make the comparisons because one of the things that I think is wonderful about having multiple eyes on the same object is you get multiple perspectives. They see things
Absolutely.
that we don't see, and and that can be contributed. So here's what we have a comment in the chat, as you can see there, saying, just joined and hope I don't miss much. I usually watch what was assigned, but then search for my favorites. Love updates. No, they know very little about the fish. Hard to see the fish many times. So I think that's great feedback, that the updates, I think your participation and your helping us participate is probably a real key to everybody's you know, involvement. And I have to say, Michael, your enthusiasm is infectious. And so, you know, if you're the band leader out there, I think you get us all engaged. So
Absolutely.
maybe next.
I love the updates. I love the newsletter. I love watching the nest every day and highlighting the fun stuff and also the bad stuff and the important information. And yeah,
Yeah,
it's just finding the balance in
yeah,
portraying this scientific information as well as engaging, you know, on a personable level too. I don't want to be too scientific and, you know,
right,
lose
right,
interest, and
right,
I don't at the same time I want to help people be, you know, scientifically informed and
right,
know the language. I know that's kind of hard too, right? Because there's just a disconnect.
right. And I think here's another comment about a record of the fish species that were brought to the nest by the ospreys, along with, a picture to so people could more easily identify them. And I think this, in some ways, speaks to the difficulty of identifying the fish. I mean, it's difficult for people even who are very well versed in the local fish, and so maybe maybe we search specifically for people to watch a nest who are familiar with fish in that area. So, and again, these are my comments are kind of predicated on the fact that, we organized this kind of hastily because of the time that you and I came together, and this was sort of an opportunity that we both wanted to take advantage of.
Oh, I'm
But
amazed that we put it together in this, you know,
yeah,
succinct fashion. I'm impressed. So
yeah,
yeah, given that we'll have more time next time, yeah, we can
yeah.
definitely.
And I'm almost wondering if we shouldn't try to stick with these 12 nests, and maybe this year do exactly what was suggested. Ask the people who operate those nests to give us some information about the fish, so that it was, a person could go to a key that would they could compare the fish and point out the differences. And you are really good at that, like the Oedipus fin. I mean, that's something that people would not necessarily know to look for. And so some instruction on each nest and the fish that they're likely to bring, you
I
know.
agree. I think in the newsletter, if I could highlight the different types of fish and what to
Yes,
look for, like the silhouette, the
yeah,
caudal fin, most of the fish are half eaten. So, I mean, it's difficult for fisheries biologists, ichthyologists to identify
right,
fish in front of their face, you know, in a
right,
lab, let
right,
alone on an Osprey camera where the fish is half
right,
eaten and you got a
right,
bad camera view and it's half eaten. So, yeah, just these little nuances, these little details can give a lot of information. So, I do agree. I do think that, you know, we could do more for fish identification. We can have more training with that. I can have diagrams, more local knowledge, and assign people their nests at their local area. I think would be very, very helpful.
yeah. So is let's get in contact. You already are in contact with all of the people who operate these cameras, and let's ask them for some really specific information. And I'm almost thinking of maybe a dichotomous tree that people
Mm-hmm.
could help identify their fish. Number one, is it a saltwater fish or a freshwater fish? I mean, that, if we could do that by the nest, where the nest is located. But then some color identifications, some adipose fins, whether the fin has a big hook on it. There are various things that we could ask that would at least get some of the basic identification down for people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know that with this higher degree of uncertainty with fish identification,
Yeah,
the yeah that will definitely, the more information we get, the better trained we are, the more acceptable it will be to the scientific community. But what's
yeah,
working really well right now is quantifying the
yeah,
amount of fish being delivered to each nest. And I think for the scientific community, that can be uh, published in a high impact scientific article. So if we can get the quantification of the fish being delivered to the nest, you know, the next steps, the next evolution of citizen science and Osprey web cameras can be used to identify fish. And again, like, why is identifying fish important? And I think
right,
as people understand why fish species are
right,
important in the areas, they will
right,
develop more of an awareness and really want to take care of the water and the fish in that area and see how important they are to ospreys.
Right. And I really do think that some of the, many of the people who did participate this year were people who had previously been watching the osprey's nest. And so, it seems to me that often citizen science projects think in terms of getting all new participants as opposed to having uh, uh, people who have been there with the project over time. So many citizen science projects are not over time, year to year to year. And I think this is an opportunity for us to, to cultivate some citizen science mentors, if you will, some people who enjoy learning with us and who can come back year after year and help new people, even to the point of fish identification and all of that. I mean, I saw some of members helping each other. There are truly some people who have been watching long enough that they know what they're doing, and might be nice to, it'd be kind of fun to have some sort of merit badges or something where you sign up, and then you get your yearly badge or your yearly pin, and you kind of climb up the ladder of being more engaged and more of a mentor for the program.
I think you reached a very important point, especially with inspiring the younger generations, even the high school students, the elementary students, and those who've been watching nests for a long time can help students,
Yeah.
become involved and see how
Yeah.
important this is. And if they have a mentor, everyone's engaged. So
Yeah.
everyone will be learning, and therefore
Yeah.
will be passing on this to the next generation. So
Yeah.
if we could get some school kids involved, for a summer program or somehow
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
would be amazing.
Yeah. Well, I think we're finding the elements here, Michael. Again, this is the first year. And I think with some national marketing and getting out to the schools, and there are schools that are in session now in Australia, for example. And if we tip the, get the southern hemisphere people watching the northern hemisphere birds during their school year and vice versa, we can have this so that it really coincides with the school years and do that. Let me. Did you see this other comment here about the pictures of the fish? They really like that idea, and then they feel like they're just guessing otherwise. So I think that's a point really well taken that we want to make sure we cover. Okay.
Yeah, more training with the fish identification.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I would feel more comfortable if people had more training. Like with the places that have done really well with that, we can adopt some of their protocols and
Right.
Yeah, really help people.
I think what we've learned here are the broadcasts are really good. People like the broadcast. Let's go on to talk. Let's ask people specifically, did they like the interviews? You did some great interviews, and there were some really interesting people. I thought your interviews were really terrific. The updates were really good, but is it worthwhile to others? And I'd really appreciate people commenting for us to go to the trouble of lining up and getting people engaged for the interviews from people behind the wall, if you will, or behind the web cameras, or the scientists. I thought personally, I really liked them. So again, I really appreciate people chiming in. And as Michael mentioned before we got on the broadcast here, if you don't want to answer in the chat for everybody to see, please send us an email and cover these points. And you can send it to contact@days@dunrovin.com, and we'll be sure to get it. You can also leave your responses in the discussion board. So I'm going to take a look, since I didn't see any comment there on the broadcast issue. I personally vote for them. I think the weekly newsletters coupled with the broadcasts really keep the project, keep people motivated and keep people engaged. What did you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. The interviews with special guests is always engaging. And as a student, I do appreciate when the professors bring in, guest speakers. I find it very engaging, and you learn so many different things from different perspectives, from different locations. So there's a lot of value to that. It's very
Right.
enriching.
Yeah,
So definitely something to carry on into the future, I think.
I think so too. And I think the fact that we've had it every week at the same time really gives people an opportunity to kind of put their schedule around it and know when to look for us, for the broadcasts. Let's take a look at the discussion board. From my perspective, it wasn't used very much. I see that most of the posts were from you or from us, from
Yeah,
from one of us. Would you say that's true?
I agree. Yes, the posts definitely from one of us.
Yeah, yeah, most of them were. And so I'm wondering if we need that. Although I do see that some people really posted some nice photos. I mean, it's not something we necessarily have to get rid of. As I go through it, I see that there were more people engaged early on, and this may be an issue of fatigue.
Right,
That-
right,
Yeah. And
right.
again, I guess one of the things that we might try in the future is to pose specific questions and ask people to look for specific things, that to post, that sort of thing. Okay. Um, yeah, I wondered if anybody wants to comment on, there were some technical problems with the cameras. Sometimes they were off, and sometimes for a couple of days that there was, they were not readily available. So
Right,
was that off-putting to people? I see that El Osprey said she loved the interviews, and she would miss that, or she or he, I don't know who that is, but yeah, I think the interviews were great. But what about the downtime? Was that disruptive, do you think? Did you get any comments on that in the chat?
yeah. First of all, I wanted to thank LL. Thank you for your participation throughout the whole project. You've been great. And yeah, the thing with what I love about multiple cam systems is that if one Nest cam does go down, you have the possibility of watching another. So that's an advantage of having multiple Nest cameras.
Yes.
But right now, for about over a week, Nest Cam 6 has been down, the OSMP camera at Colorado. And I'm discouraged because the eggs just hatched, and the day after the camera went out. So I feel like technical difficulties can be frustrating, especially when you're trying to identify fish. You
Yeah,
don't have the angle that you need,
right.
or sometimes the quality isn't that great. So it can be very frustrating, and that can make people even more fatigued.
Yeah, it does speak, though. I agree with you. It does speak to having, a good number of nests, because we started with 12, but we've had problems with, one of the nests was abandoned. I mean, there's these issues that if you only start with 5, you might end up with 2. Whereas if
Right.
you start with 12 and you end up with 8, that's a significant number of nests, enough to make some inferences from.
Exactly, and that's so important. That's why we chose this many. Um,
Yeah,
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 you're
but I
right.
think I think more might be more difficult. Maybe we did hit the sweet spot on
I think
on
so. I think so. I think we just needed, maybe more time to
yeah.
develop this program, develop more training protocols, and I do see a bright future for this, and we'll just stick with it.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things is, and I'm going to ask LL Osprey because this person has been so engaged. I'd like some comments on the website, on the page, and how useful was the organization of the material. We tried to put a lot of material on one page. So we had these drop downs, that are at the top about, information about each camera, each Nest camera, and then some resources on the biology of the osprey. and you know, where the locations were, etc. And then each camera had its own drop down for recording. And I was just curious, I'd love to get some feedback from people about the organization of that material. How did it work for you, since you used it a lot, Michael? How did that end up working for you?
I'm a little biased with that,
Yeah,
but again, this has we're breaking ground. It hasn't never been done before, and trying to collect data and organize data for this many nests and with citizen science
right.
participation. So I mean, there was some really important issues on how to organize and set up the website. And I want to know from the user perspective how that was for everyone. I know that there's been some difficulty, especially with like logging data. It's not so user friendly. I've heard like there's just too many drop downs, and the form is too long. You know, should we have just put one button by the camera so that you could just report the fish and just have the chat there?
Hmm.
So yeah, all
Hmm.
these things we need to know about. So
Yes.
any of your comments or suggestions out there, please really let us know. We
Yeah.
want to make this easy from your perspective.
Yes. Yeah, I think so too. I think there was some real ergonomic issues that we, you know, in our haste to put it up there and try to get all the information in one place, that we could have been a little more streamlined in how we did this. And so I think that's a really important thing. And again, I'm going to ask people to email us or leave your opinions in the discussion board or on the chat, wherever you feel comfortable. But please give us your feedback, because this is the only way we're going to make it better. Okay. So those are the kind of the major issues that I thought of as in terms of feedback, is the duration, and then the difficulty of identifying the fish, the number of cameras and which cameras people were watching, and then the, you know, the ergonomics of the website itself, the web page. So please, everyone, chime in and let us know what you think, because I'm hoping that Michael will be available to do this again next year. And I'm hoping that this fall, what you and I can do, Michael, is to kind of outline what we want it to look like for next spring, so that we are, you know, well ahead of the game. So okay. So with that, unless other people have things to chime in about, I'm going to turn my attention to our upcoming book for a moment. But continue to chat. We'll take note of anything anybody puts in the chat or in the discussion board. But I wanted to remind people that we are about to read this book, and you can see that I'm in it. You'll see two bookmarks because my husband and I are fighting over it.
That's what
We're,
David Gessner does. That's his writing
yeah,
style.
yeah,
You know, once you read, it's just amazing.
it's a really good book, and it's Soaring with Fidel. And I'm going to read you the foreword to the reader. And I'm hoping it will really tickle you, because it certainly tickled me. And I'm particularly interested in adding something to this book project at the end. This, I'm surprising people here now. But after I've read the foreword, people will understand where I'm coming from. I'm just going to read the first paragraph. The first sentence is short. It says, "This is not a bird book." Okay, this is not a bird book. Okay, yes, sure, there are some birds in it, lots of them, in fact, but this is not a bird book. It is a book, among other things, about the nature of human happiness and what happens when human beings, instead of focusing on themselves, turn their attention to things with feathers that fly. And you'll see many of the characters in this book have done just that and seem the better for it. The high points in their lives have corresponded, not coincidentally, with the flights of the birds they follow. And they have, to a certain extent, become what they watched. That is, have become imbued with the avian attributes of flight and freedom. Of course, I don't want this to all sound too healthy. There's an element of obsession in almost every bird person I know. But it is increasingly, in an increasingly restrictive and xenophobic world, birds have pulled those people across borders. More than that, you might say their empathy with these birds is kind of a flight itself. And I just think I've always thought that of all birds, ospreys were ambassador birds and could take us across the world as they take themselves across the world. And if you start reading this book, you will indeed see that the book is not as much about the birds, although he writes incredibly beautiful passages about ospreys, but about what the birds mean and how we can view their lives intertwined with our own and take from them, inspiration, spiritual exhilaration. And it's just this wonderful relationship that we can have with these magnificent animals that are so unlike us in so many ways. So I'm hopeful that that those of you who do participate in the book club, and next week I will be on our usual broadcast with my co-host, who is Diane Hoffman from the Philadelphia area, and we will be talking about the first 4 chapters only. So we're going to take this in bits and pieces so that people can keep up. But at the end, after we've had our discussion of the full book with our literary host, Judy Blunt, who will be with us, and I keep pinging David Gessner in hopes that he will rise to the bait. Not yet, but I'm still at it. We'd love to have him join us. But after that, as a prologue to the book, I'd really like to see if people would be willing to share with one another a small paragraph or page or essay about what these birds have become to them. I mean, I could write a full book about my association with Harriet. I mean, I'm just in love with this bird, and I've taken so much from her. She has enriched my life in ways that, are hard for me to convey. And so I'd like to give others the opportunity to, to tell us how these birds have enriched their lives. And I'll look to you too, Michael.
That's a great, wonderful opportunity. Yeah, I was just thinking about that too. I do have, my story about them. Now they've helped me so much. I've gained so much from them, changed the course of my life completely. But yeah, David Gessner is a beautiful, creative writer, very lyrical. And you can't just read one sentence. I mean, it's a feast. And yes, there is some obsession with ospreys.
And not all obsessions are bad.
Oh, yeah, exactly. We'd rather be obsessed with something wonderful and good than, all the other stuff out there.
That's right. And it certainly keeps one from being bored. So here we have a comment here from Osprey. Liked the information on the nest. It took a while to get used to. I mean, there was a lot of information on this page, had problems with the screen, sometimes freezing, yes. And oftentimes, people can help themselves on the far end by turning down the quality of the broadcast on YouTube, because if you're trying to broadcast it too high a quality, you get the circle of death. So sometimes you have to back off. This broadcast depends not only on our bandwidth, but on yours. It's the bandwidth on both ends, the receiving and the broadcasting. So she says, this is our first webcam viewing. This would be a great book for my first book club. Haven't found the book yet. Better than watching than reading. Well, get the book, Osprey. You're going to love the book. You're going to love the book. And I would really be interested in comments from people for whom this is the first year. It's hard for me to remember my first year of falling in love with Harriet. I mean, she's been such a part of my life for a decade now that I can't remember much without her.
Wow. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
beautiful story. We want to hear that. We want to see that, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So, and I want to hear many of our viewers are exactly the same. There's a number of viewers who've been watching for years, and I would love to work with them to put together even an article that we could publish about the 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 emotional bond and what they've learned about nature and how it has opened them up or not, whatever. I would love to hear from them about their relationship to these birds that they've been watching. So we'll do that. And believe me, I'll be at you. I'll hunt you down.
I think that's a great
Probably,
idea, and it will help, you know, inspire everyone,
I
those
think
who are
it,
new and those who've been watching for a long time. We want to uplift each other, and that will
yeah,
definitely do that. Ospreys, you know, they've lifted us up, so we can do
yes,
that for each other now through them.
yes, exactly. And I actually think this is a really important part of citizen science because the whole purpose is a two-way street here to provide, really good information to understanding the biology, but then also to understand what humans get from nature. And we get a lot, even if that nature is presented to us via web cameras. I mean, we're all part of this world, and knowing these magnificent creatures are out there and understanding them just adds to our own lives. So, if you haven't gotten the book, you still have time. We're only going to read the first 4 chapters next week, and it's Soaring with Fidel by David Gessner. Wonderful book. I know you're going to enjoy it. And with that, I know that you'll be tuning in as you can, Michael. I assume you're reading the book.
Right. I actually am waiting for the book. I have David's first book, which is The
Ah,
Return of the Osprey, and
yes,
the
I have
writing.
I have that book right here.
Oh, you
I
do? Yeah. So
I
I've been starting to
do.
read. I've been starting to read that book first
Yes,
instead of Soaring
yes,
with Fidel. And
yeah,
yeah, I'm at the first chapter, and he's describing pre-DDT and what the
yeah,
ospreys, how that affected the ospreys. And I didn't know that the ospreys, you know, had so much attention that the Environmental Defense Fund, they got started because of the ospreys.
yeah.
So, and Rachel Carson in the Silent Spring book, I mean, it was just created a whole movement. And ospreys are just such a conservation, you know, success story. They bounced back from nothing, and now here they are, adapted and enriching everyone's lives, and they just made it back. So that gives us a lot of hope,
They sure do. They sure, and resilience and
resilience.
determination.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, and ferocity. These birds know what they're doing, and they live in a tough world, and they manage it. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So I'm glad you're going to be part of the book club, Michael. I'm glad that you are willing to chime in with what these birds have meant to you. Clearly, they've tapped into something in you.
Oh
You've become
yeah,
so
yeah.
enamored with them.
And you picked a great author, a great book. You know, I just read on Amazon, or you can order the book in other places too, but they have
Yes.
it available at
Yep.
Amazon, and they give you a chance to look inside. And that was it. I just sneak peeked some of the chapters. I'm like, oh wow, this guy is just such an incredible writer.
Yeah.
And there's
He
some
really is.
descriptions. Yeah, he is.
Yeah. I mean, oftentimes I find it difficult to convey to people the excitement it is to watch an osprey dive, just what that entails, and the athleticism of these birds. So he captures that so beautifully, I believe. Yeah.
It's impressive.
So great.
Yeah, that's why he teaches at Harvard with creative writing. So
That's right.
yeah,
He's
good luck getting him to get him
well,
on
I'm
the show. I
gonna
hope keep emailing him. It would be amazing.
knocking on his door,
Yeah.
If nothing else, I'm persistent, okay? He might just have to say yes just to get me out of his inbox.
There we go.
The worst things have happened. Okay. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and I do hope that you will get the book and read along with us, and I hope that at the end of that you will share with us what ospreys have meant to you. And in the meantime, please continue to watch the nests and record your data. Michael has been doing just an incredible job of going back and looking at the recordings that has to have been taken hours of your time, Michael. And please give us your feedback. If not here in the chat, please send us an email or however you want to contact us. But we are excited to make this a really, a high participation and an engaging project. So with that, are you going to be in LA for a while longer? What are your immediate plans, Michael?
Yeah, I'll be here for a while, and then I'll be moving in mid-August to Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And the situation's very fluid, but we're scheduled to move onto campus. So
Yeah.
and I'll probably be on a broadcast when I'm there as a little update and a farewell to the summer.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'll have some pictures and
Yeah.
some of the views from my campus. I would love to share that with everyone.
You'll have to give us a tour. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You're one of us now, Michael. You
Oh.
can't shake us, okay?
Oh, it's a pleasure to land here.
Great. That's great. Well, thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next week when we look at the first 4 chapters of Soaring with Fidel. And with that, Michael and I will sign off. Thank you, James, for helping.
Thank you, James.
Technology. Thank you. Goodbye to everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.